how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. So,
How can you not be great? Look at
yeah,
all these
Small Business Day.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So, Neil, Neil, this is our small business update. We do this a few times a year. And Neil is especially gifted at breaking down the issues that are impacting small businesses and explaining what they mean to you. So let's just start. Let's talk about the economy. I feel like it's a little complicated. So how are you feeling about the economy in general? What looks good to you?
Yeah, it is complicated. I think to understand where we are today, you got to go back a little bit. So let's go back to the beginning of the year. We thought that the economy would grow at about 2.3, 2.4% this year. That's good. It's not great. We want to be at 3% plus. That's our kind of historical long-term average, but it's a strong economy. That economy had some good things going for it at the beginning of the year. Deregulation out of the administration was really kind of reducing the red tape burden on businesses. We were seeing the positive effects of that. The tax bill provided businesses with certainty, consumers with more certainty. That was kind of wind in our sails. It helped offset some of the headwinds. Tariffs and trade uncertainty was one headwind. Workforce and some of the immigration challenges, the second headwind. But you take those kind of puts and takes and you add in AI, and the economy was looking okay. The conflict in Iran, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, it did dramatically change things. We most often see it when we fill up our cars and we see the gas prices. That's felt every day. If you're in business, you know that it's also affected other things. Prices of shipping, for example, as diesel went up. One of the most dramatic things it did, though, was a real blow to both consumer and small business confidence. Consumer confidence in April was at its lowest level ever, according to the University of Michigan. People are really concerned about inflation returning. We at the U.S. Chamber survey small businesses. We saw a significant drop in people's outlook for both their local and the national economy, and importantly they said that they were more likely to hold back on plans to invest and hire. Now here's where it gets complicated. People aren't acting that way. They're telling pollsters that I'm really worried about the economy, and we've seen almost no downturn in consumer spending. So they're still spending. Small businesses say that they're worried about whether they should add headcount or not. There's been no downturn in small business hiring. And so, in fact, just in the month of March, 5.2 million people got a new job, got hired someplace in America in the private sector. 80% of those 5.2 million went to work for a small business. Small businesses are not pulling back. So when we look out to the future, we kind of see one or two paths. One path is people start acting on their fears. Consumers pull back. Small businesses begin to pull back. They don't do those nearly 5 million new hires. They don't invest. And then the economy really would be in trouble. The other path is that there's more certainty, more clarity, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz and energy prices. And even though gas prices and diesel prices aren't going to immediately come down, if people have confidence that over the course of 9 to 12 months that they never act on their fears. And so I don't know which way we're going to go, but I do know that it comes down to whether or not consumers and small businesses act on their fears, or whether they allay their fears and they keep hiring and spending like they've been doing.
What do you think the disconnect is? Like, why are people saying they're worried about the economy, but they're not acting like they're worried about it?
I think there are a couple of reasons. First, when gas prices started going up, it was actually, shipping prices started going up, it was actually an opportune moment for it in the sense that people had a cushion. We had higher than normal tax refunds in February and March as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill. That's both for consumers and for small businesses. So they had a little bit of extra money to cushion that kind of economic blow. Now, the downside to that is that cushion's kind of gone, and we have to worry about what happens in May and June and beyond. The second reason is I think it's the insidious nature of inflation and why it's so important that the Federal Reserve and policymakers remain focused on inflation. If you have a belief that prices are going to keep going up and you feel it every time you fill up the tank, every time you go to the grocery store, you have a very negative outlook on the economy. And so people's perception of inflation and prices really does drive their economic outlook. Thankfully, they had cushion to get through it right now, but if that cushion disappears or if conditions worsen, the disconnect could disappear, but it could disappear in a bad direction.
Right. Okay. We can't talk about the economy without talking about tariffs.
Yeah.
So there is now in place a refund process for small businesses who paid tariffs under IEEPA, which
The
is
International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
right, which is just one mechanism by which there were tariffs imposed. So for people who paid under that, there's now a refund process.
Yep.
So can you explain the refund process a little bit, who it applies to, and if people are actually able to apply for the refunds?
Yeah, so if you paid tariffs for the first time last year on something that you were importing, more likely than not you were paying IEEPA tariffs. That was the bulk of the tariffs. There are different tariffs on automobile parts and on copper and aluminum and steel, but for most small businesses, you were importing things and you were paying tariffs for the first time under IEEPA. There were about 58 million shipments that came in that people paid tariffs on that they are entitled to refunds on. The Department of Homeland Security oversees Customs and Border Protection. Those are the guys who collect the tariffs. They are also the folks who have set up a refund process to refund about $170 billion to about 300,000 importers, the vast majority, more than 90% of whom are small businesses, of the tariffs that they've paid. We have a guide on the U.S. Chamber website to help you walk through the process. It's pretty simple. They've done a pretty good job. You have to register. You have to get your registration approved. Then you have to upload forms about your imports and the duties paid. You get to upload your form once. You don't have to upload one for every single entry that came in. They have an automated process on the back end that verifies that, in fact, you paid those duties and you're entitled to a refund. And then they deposit the refund into your banking account. And so actually next week, we expect the first refunds to actually hit people's bank accounts.
Great. You mentioned the One Big Beautiful Bill before. It was enacted last year. What can small businesses expect to see this year that's happening?
The first thing, and this is kind of the thing that we sometimes forget, is we avoided a massive tax increase on small businesses. And when I say massive, that's not an exaggeration. The normal marginal tax rate for a small business would have gone from 29% at the federal level to 39%. That's more than a third increase in the tax rate that you have to pay. That did not occur, and it now won't occur. There are no more cliffs. For taxes to go up, Congress is going to have to actually go in and vote to raise taxes. The second thing it did is, if you've invested in research and development for your business, you know that you have been amortizing those expenses over a number of years, meaning that you spent $100 on research and development, but you only got to deduct $30 on your taxes, and then you had to deduct more of it the next year and the next year. If you are a small business, you can go get that whole refund for your past R&D expenses right now. A lot of small businesses did that when they paid their taxes this past April. That was good news. The third element is the ability, when you are buying equipment for your business, to be assured that you can write off 100% of the cost of that equipment in the year in which you make the purchase. And as you know, that makes the cost of investing in new equipment cheaper, which is great news for small businesses who are trying to grow and expand or simply replace worn-out equipment.
This is an election year, so
Yes.
So what are you expecting to see? Just what might Congress be doing between now and November?
Things tend to slow down in Congress once we start getting close to an election, and I think that's going to be the case over the course of this summer and into the fall. They have a few must-pass items, funding some of the immigration work at the Department of Homeland Security. There's some national security stuff that they have to resolve. But I don't expect that we're going to see a lot more legislating. We are pushing for things like permitting reform. There's a bipartisan housing bill that we're on the cusp of getting done. It's possible that we get a couple of things like that signed into law before Election Day, but I think a lot of the activity is going to be post-election and into the new Congress.
You know, I wanted to ask you about permitting reform. We talk about it all the time, but I'm not sure people know what that is. Can you just explain what permitting reform is? Because it's a big issue here at the Chamber. Can you just explain what it is?
Yeah, so people are generally more familiar with permits at the local level, right? So you're expanding your building, you're modifying it, you're doing something, you got to go down to the municipal government and get a permit. In some instances, you also have to get a federal permit. And so if there's any federal nexus with the program, with the construction that's going on, that requires a federal permit. So most infrastructure that's being built requires a federal permit. If you're above a certain size, like a big new housing development, for example, you might require a federal permit for how the rainwater that previously fell on the land, what happens to it? And depending on the size, that can require a federal permit. So there's more things than you would think that require a federal permit today, and we want to streamline that process. Some projects, it can take 6 to 7 years to get a permit approved. That's for a project that might only take 3 years to construct. It should never be the case that you spend more time doing paperwork than you actually do building something. That's what we're trying to fix.
Yeah, I just wanted them to understand immigration, you mentioned it briefly. Where are things, a lot of small businesses really depend on workers who come here from other countries. Can you talk a little bit about that and where things are with that?
Yeah, so let's start with the good news. In the administration, President Trump deserves a lot of credit. Securing the southern border, we couldn't even have conversations about legal immigration reform when we were having the difficulties with kind of an uncontrolled border. That is now secure. We need to have some real serious conversations about our workforce needs and legal immigration and how it meets it. And by the way, what to do with folks who have not violated the criminal statutes. They're not criminal, but in many cases have been here 10, 15, 20 years and have been gainfully employed. They work for small businesses around this country. And Congress is going to have to tackle this. There are bipartisan proposals that are slowly gaining traction. Unfortunately, as I said a moment ago, we're getting pretty close to the election, and the concept of them coming together on a bipartisan deal before the election is not going to happen. But our goal is to have teed up, kind of post-election, some bipartisan changes that can have more people coming to this country legally to live and to work, and that resolves the status of people who've been in our community, in some instances for decades, living and working, so that they can be assured that they can stay.
Any small business owner that offers health insurance to their employees will say that health insurance premiums are a really big problem for them. Last year, health insurance subsidies expired. They have not been renewed. What are your thoughts or insights into health insurance and the costs for businesses?
Yeah, two issues. For small businesses who are offering insurance to their employees, yes, premiums are a problem, just like they are in the overall system, and we've got to start figuring out ways to reduce healthcare costs to become more efficient. I actually think there are some things on the horizon that will help with that, including AI and some efficiency gains that we can get in the system there that will put downward pressure on prices. The subsidies that you talked about, this is for people who buy healthcare on what's called the ACA or Obamacare exchange. In 2021, Congress boosted, this is in the middle of COVID, boosted the level of the subsidy. That expired at the end of last year. There was a lot of concern about would a lot of people just lose their insurance. We don't really know how all of this is shaking out yet. When the beginning of the year, when people had to re-enroll, we didn't see a huge drop in re-enrollment in those ACA exchange plans. We have seen people shifting plans. They may have had a more generous plan with a lower out-of-pocket cost and a bigger subsidy. They lost part of the bigger subsidy, and rather than paying the higher premium, they switched to a plan that had a higher out-of-pocket cost. We don't know how many people have fully done that yet. And we're watching to see if affordability remains an issue as people are continuing to pay those premiums. So I'm not sure we really know the full impact yet, but it's something that we're paying close attention to.
You mentioned AI. You and I talk about it every conversation. In fact, many people in this room today took the Chamber's in-person AI training for small businesses today. And a little plug that we have also launched a virtual AI training for small businesses, which all of you can learn more about later. And if you're watching at home, you can see it on our Watch Live page. It's a very exciting initiative that we've done where we're training thousands of small businesses in using AI. What are you seeing businesses use AI for that's really exciting?
Almost everything, right? It is really remarkable. So it's improving efficiency and operations. We see businesses using it they're going in to pitch a potential customer. And they go to AI and they say, here's what I'm planning to say to this prospective customer. Do you think that this will resonate? And you put in who the customer is, et cetera, and it gives tips to you on how to refine your sales pitch. It's really remarkable, from everything from doing that to improving manufacturing operations, maximizing your supply chain management, maximizing inventory. So much is lost to bad inventory practices. You can spend a lot of money on systems to help you manage your inventory. AI can help you do it often at a fraction of that cost. And so it's virtually no aspect that we don't see, particularly small businesses pioneering the use of AI.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing it every day. We actually have time for some audience questions. Do we have anyone who has a question for Neil about any of these issues or any that we did not cover today? I can't see that well, so I know we have mic runners out there.
Just raise your hand or stand up, we'll get to you.
Yeah, we have a mic runner. Nope.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, how do you see the impact of AI on the employment sector? You talked about strong factors of AI improving the economy, but how do you see that affecting the employment sector?
Yeah, it is definite. There are some job functions. Let's start with some jobs. There are some jobs that are going to be displaced by AI, just like technology every technology advance displaced some jobs, right? And so, the typing pool is no longer thanks to innovations in kind of computer technology. When I first got to Washington, D.C., you be careful driving down the street because of bike couriers. The fax machine and then email, no one's a bike courier anymore. That will actually be a smaller number. There is a larger set, and when you read these stories about the large percentage of jobs that are going to be impacted by AI, that analysis is usually about particular functions of a job. So you spend 20% of your time editing something, and AI is going to make you a much more efficient editor, and so it will displace 20%. That doesn't mean you've lost your job. It means that you're going to use that 20% to do something else that is more meaningful and more productive. We also know it's going to create jobs in ways that we can't really even possibly imagine at this moment. And so that's the way every kind of technology has unfolded. We certainly want to be in a position that we help people, particularly those in that first group, manage through this. And we want to make sure that people in the second group are learning how to optimize AI so that they can continue to be efficient in their job. And we want to make sure that there are no barriers to people in that third group who are taking advantage of that. We poll small businesses about their use of generative AI. 57% last September said that they were using it. Of those 57%, 81% said that they had also added headcount. And so that did not surprise me because I think the folks who are at the cutting edge of this are using the technology to expand their business, and you're always going to need people, and you're going to be hiring people as your business grows and expands.
I feel like right, a couple over here. Oh, yep.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Derek Perry with Optimize Advisors, and I do kind of that stuff. We help organizations use AI to optimize their business. And so I'm fascinated by the fact that you're doing training on that, which is fabulous. I'm curious to see what is your perception of the small and medium business market using AI effectively, and what the uptake is, like what's stopping them from really using it?
I'm actually very bullish on uptake. I mentioned a moment ago, last September we polled 57% self-reported. 3 years ago when we first did that survey, it was in the low 20s. Think about 3 years ago, like we weren't talking about AI all that much. And I said, in fact, I told our team, I was like, the poll's bad. You got bad results. There's no way it's that high. And I sat in a room about like this, and I said, I'm going to show our staff how right I am about this. And I asked this group, how many of you are using AI? And about 40% of the hands in the room went up. And I said, turns out our poll was wrong the other direction if this is part of a representative sample. One of the reasons I think that it is so high is if you think about prior technologies, the personal computer, for example, incredibly expensive in the 70s and 80s. Big businesses could afford to buy it for their employees and use it. Small businesses were at the tail end of that. Even the internet, your capacity for small businesses spread around the country to get high-speed internet access wasn't that great 25, 30 years ago. Small businesses were at the tail end of taking advantage of that. This technology, there's virtually no barriers to use in some form or another, and so small businesses are early adopters. And here's the other interesting thing I tell our big business members at the U.S. Chamber. I go, I bet you have a lot of rules about how your employees use AI because you want to control and limit what goes into it and what comes out. Oh yeah, we got lots of rules. The lawyers are all over it. I said, you know who has none of those rules and is experimenting in ways that are probably going to end up eating your lunch? Small and mid-sized businesses, because they're being more creative and they're being more dynamic. And so I actually have last year we had a record number of new business applications in the United States. As we learn more about who those people were that started businesses, I think we're going to find people who were utilizing AI. And I think that 20 years from now, when someone talks about the Fortune 50, we're going to be talking about a lot of businesses that were small this year or just got started this year and the next couple of years who are going to take advantage of that and accelerate it. So I'm pretty darn bullish.
I think we have one more right there. We have 1 minute left.
Thanks. Thanks, Neil. Just want to, Jonathan Altman's with the Global Entrepreneurship Network. Just wanted to shift a little bit to whether you think that entrepreneurship, as defined by new firm formation, increasing rates of new firm formation, in the context of almost all the net new jobs come from new firms, not necessarily from some small ones. And the question is, how much of this is likely to appear on the Washington policy agenda? We've had administrations over the years. Sometimes it's front and center. Sometimes it's not really there. It was, for example, with the Obama administration, but not with the Biden administration. So I just wondered if you had any sense of temperature check on that for those of us that are trying to drive rates of new firm formation around the world. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it should be higher, and I think there should be more of a focus on how do we make sure that these businesses survive. You know, we got this recovery in new business formation kind of coming out of COVID, and I'll tell you there was a ton of skepticism in this town of those aren't real businesses. You know, these are desperation businesses. And for a moment, people didn't, you know, you couldn't look at the data and say. What we found out was that, no, these were in fact real new businesses and people who were going to hire. And what it was people who figured out that I can be a retailer without opening a brick and mortar store. By the way, when someone opened that non-brick and mortar retailer, someone needed to be the last mile of delivery. I can start a business to do that. And we saw people who said, gosh, I thought to be a service provider, I had to see everyone in person, face to face. And they suddenly realized that you could be a consultant to people that you never sat down in a room physically with, thanks to everyone accepting Teams and Zoom and all of those things, and that those businesses have continued to grow and explode. I think we're going to find the same thing about AI, but I think we need to do a better job of making sure that policymakers understand that this really is a resurgence, and we ought to be focused on policies that help sustain that level of new entrepreneurship and help them grow and succeed. And so I feel like the stuff's right to make it happen. We just need a good policy environment to help fuel it.
Well, thank you, Neil. That is all we have time for, and I want to say thank you. And I also want to say to our audience that if you're listening to Neil talk and thinking, wow, they do a lot of work at the U.S. Chamber for Small Businesses, it is true. And if you are interested in becoming a small business member, we actually have some members of our membership team here with us. If you guys could just raise your hands. They were talking to some of you before, but if you're interested in small business membership, you can find one of them. So thank you so much, Neil. We really appreciate it.
And you can help guide this work.
Yes.
Our small business members help guide our small business work. That's how we learn about the issues that are important. And so if there's something that is important to you that we didn't talk about today, find one of the team here, become a member, and help inform and guide our work on your behalf.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.